All right, everybody may be seated. Welcome back, members of the jury. All right, State, please call your next witness.
State calls Dr. Russel Vega.
Stand right here, face the clerk, raise your right hand.
Swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do. Okay, so you come over here. Thank you. Right up that way.
Are you ready, State?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Will you please tell us your full name and spell your last name?
My full name is Russel Scott Vega. The last name is spelled V-E-G-A.
Dr. Vega, what is your profession?
I'm a forensic pathologist or medical examiner.
All right. And what are the duties of a medical examiner?
The medical examiner's job is to investigate certain deaths. Those deaths are specified in statute or state law. And more or less, the deaths that the medical examiner is supposed to investigate are non-natural deaths, violent deaths, deaths that occur as a result of anything other than natural disease.
All right. And what is your jurisdiction as a medical examiner?
As the district medical examiner for this current district of District 12, my jurisdiction includes DeSoto and Manatee counties, as well as Sarasota County.
Will you tell the jury a little bit about your formal education, please?
Certainly. I got my undergraduate degree at Florida State University. I majored in physics and biochemistry at FSU. After graduating there, I went to medical school at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Following medical school, I did 2 years of training in general surgery and then 4 years of training in anatomic and clinical pathology. Pathology is the subspecialty of medicine that deals with diagnosing diseases by looking at fluids, different laboratory tests, biopsies, organs removed at surgery, and by doing autopsies. And after all of that, I did a 1-year fellowship or subspecialty year in forensic pathology, and that's the branch of pathology which specializes in autopsy and in death investigations.
What is an autopsy?
An autopsy is an examination that is performed on somebody who's died, and that exam can be performed for different reasons, but generally it's to identify any diseases, complications, anatomic abnormalities, injuries, or other things which might be of interest to either doctors who order that or in our realm for medical examiner autopsies to figure out what the cause and the manner of death are.
All right, thank you. So I want to take you back to September 3rd of 2023, Doctor.
Yes.
Did you go to the death scene in this case?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the members of the jury what are the advantages or the reasons for a medical examiner such as you to go to the death scene itself?
By examining the scene of a death where the body is still there, there is certain information which can be gathered, which can be helpful in the coming process of doing the autopsy at some later point, or to gather information which might be useful for law enforcement or other agencies at that point in their investigation. Some of the things that are of value in that scene investigation then are the ability to try to put together the circumstances that led up to the death, the evaluation of where the actual injuries that led to death occurred and whether or not they occurred elsewhere or at the site where the body was, and to get an idea of what the nature of the injuries or potential injuries, before we get out there, perhaps we don't know, but the nature of the injuries that led to the person's death. Finally, we might get information that leads us to a rough estimate of how long a person has been deceased and at that site.
Okay, and that is a rough estimate, isn't it, Doctor?
Very rough, yes.
Okay, because on TV shows, you always have a detective saying, how long has this person been dead? And the doctor says 2 hours and 27 minutes. Is that possible?
It is possible with certain elements, such as some kind of device which is tracing an individual's vital signs at the time, or even better, a surveillance video or something of that nature.
Right.
But just based on the autopsy findings, it can almost never be that precise.
Okay, thank you. So after you went to the death scene and did that examination that you talked about, looking at the circumstances surrounding it, the nature of the wounds, et cetera, did there come a time when the bodies of Robbie and Jennifer Tower were transported to the morgue?
Yes.
Okay. And did you perform an autopsy on both Mr. and Mrs. Tower, Robbie and Jennifer Tower?
Yes, I performed autopsies on each of them.
When did those autopsies take place?
So the autopsies were performed on September 3rd of 2023.
Okay. Doctor, I'm showing you have been marked for identification as States Exhibit 34A through 34K. And that includes double G, so 34G and 34 double G. Take a look at those for me, please.
Certainly. I've reviewed them.
Do you recognize these photos, Doctor, as the photographs that were taken at the time you autopsied the body of Robbie Tower?
They are, yes.
Are they a true and accurate depiction of the procedure of the autopsy that you conducted?
They are.
Your Honor, I'm offering States Exhibit 34A, 34B, 34C, 34D, 34E, F, G, 34 double G, 34H, 34I, 34J, and 34K. Into evidence, please.
Any objection to 34A through K and double G?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, they'll be admitted. You may publish them at your leisure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's better if you put those lights down and keep them.
Is it routine practice, doctor, to take photographs during the course of the autopsy?
It is.
Why?
Photographs are the best form of documentation that we have, especially for external findings on the body. I can make notes, I can make verbal descriptions of findings, but nothing conveys the nature of many findings, especially injuries on the body, like a photograph does.
Let's look first at State's Exhibit 34A. And we're going to talk about some of the markings that you have as part of the autopsy procedure, specifically the letters that we find on Mr. Tower's body.
Yes.
So we're going to go first, even though this is not in chronological or numerical order on your autopsy report, but we're going to go first to the stab wounds on Robbie Tower's face, please.
Yes.
And by the way, were you able to document how many stab wounds were inflicted on Mr. Tower?
I was, although the determination is, it may not be exactly what somebody else would have determined with the same findings, because there's such a variation in terms of how deep or how severe or superficial the injuries are, that some of them I didn't classify necessarily as a counted stab wound or cut wound, but I did note the other injuries in my report. So in total, for Mr. Tower, I counted 68 stab or cutting type wounds, with more that were small or superficial or subtle wounds that were probably sustained in the same way, but not totally characteristic stab or cut wounds.
But at least 68 distinctive stab wounds that you could identify as such.
Yes.
Thank you. So let's look now at State's Exhibit 34A, and I'd like to talk about the wounds that you cataloged on the face of Mr. Tower. So let's talk about those, if you would, please.
Certainly.
So we can start anywhere you like, Doctor. If you want to start on the upper right cheek, or upper left cheek, pardon me.
Certainly. So the injuries that we see on the face here are this largest wound, which was labeled with the letter H, the much smaller and very superficial wound labeled T here, and then the wound on the chin labeled I. And I think it's maybe important to notice that, or to note that when I was assigning these letters, to some extent, it was largely a random application. I did it based on the letters I had at the time and what I was examining at the time, and it doesn't have any correlation to timing or anything else with the injuries.
I understand. Thank you.
So of these, H is the most visible on the skin, obviously. I believe, is two separate wounds which are just joined. In other words, they were very close together and seemed to form one single wound. Of these wounds, none of them caused any major injury. The injuries really just involve soft tissue only.
And in addition to these that we can see in 34A, I want to move to 34B. And take a look at the wound that you called S, which was also included as a stab wound to the face.
Yes.
Can you please tell us a little bit about this wound?
This wound is a wound which involves the back edge of the ear. So this is the left ear. So in this photo, the nose would have been oriented here, and the back of the head here, the neck over here. And this wound essentially cut through all of the tissue over the back edge of the ear, essentially at the same level as the ear canal here.
Right, next, let's look at 34C, please. Now we're going to move on to your recitation of the stab wounds of the back. And the back of the neck, I should say. So let's look at this photograph, 34C. And there's quite an extensive amount of lacerations here. So would you please just start wherever you like and talk about them?
So all of these injuries are relatively similar, meaning that are all injuries that are inflicted with a sharp instrument like a knife. There are some which are longer on the skin than others, or that are wider. I would not take that to mean that they were inflicted with a different instrument. They might all have been inflicted with the same instrument. It depends on what's done with that knife once it's in the skin. It's very easy to flex a little bit along the skin with the blade and cause the stab wound to be longer on the skin. And also the tension on the skin is what determines how wide the injury appears here. So even though these injuries on the back of the neck and the upper back have varying appearances, they all were potentially really sustained in the same way with a stab with a knife. Of these injuries, the vast majority of all of these, that includes the clusters of injuries on the back of the neck, the very upper back here, and lower in the back, that for the most part, these injuries involved only soft tissue and did not penetrate to any deeper major blood vessels or organs.
So would a person have been able to survive if they had only sustained these injuries and even the ones on the face?
Potentially, yes. Long-term complications, of course, could ensue, but in the short term, yes.
I understand. Okay. So I would also like to go to 34D because that's hard to see in this photograph. And there's a stab.
This here? This is.
No,
Oh.
I'm sorry, my 34D.
Oh, I'm
No.
sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry, doctor. Photograph 34D. Because there's a stab wound on the neck end, which I'd like you to talk about. And I wasn't able to find a photograph that included that on the larger 34C. So can you tell us a little bit about the end?
Yes, although it will help if I refer to my records here. And
Refresh your recollection, yes.
yeah, and
It appears to be a cluster of a number of wounds that you just cataloged as ends.
yes. So this cluster is involving the left side of the neck. What I described in my report is it's posterolateral, meaning it's the side of the neck and toward the back. So the back left side of the neck. And there are several stab wounds that you see here. I counted this as 5, but some of the stab wounds I think that you can see on the edges of this photo were included in another grouping.
Let's go now to, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. bit and go to a wound on the scalp. We're going to look at State's Exhibit 34E. And that's going to be the first wound that you talked about in your report.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this.
For orientation, this is the top of the scalp. So this is the very edge of the left ear that you're seeing here. The right ear would be more or less over here in this photograph if it were extended. And this is a short stab wound, essentially right to the top of the head.
Superficial as well.
It is. Of all the injuries that we've discussed so far, none of them, with the possible exception of one, really caused any significant deeper injury. It was all soft tissue injury.
Let's move next to State's Exhibit 34F. And now we're going to talk about the left side of the neck.
Yes.
And the injuries that were inflicted to Mr. Tower. It looks like there's a lot of clusters there. Can you just go through that for the members of the jury, please?
Yes. And I would point out that we've already looked at in closer detail at this cluster here and at the injury to the left ear here. What we really haven't seen before is this cluster over the left upper neck and cheek area. It's labeled J, and then these other clusters which are at the base of the neck and over the top of the shoulder region here that are M, L, R, K, and G.
Now I'm going to I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm going to go to the larynx because that's how you discussed it in your report. So let's look now at States 34G. And first of all, will you tell the members of the jury, might be oversimplifying, you probably know this already, but where is the larynx located?
So the larynx is the medical word for the voice box. The front part of the larynx is what you feel in your neck, is the Adam's apple. What we see in this photograph is the larynx removed from the neck. And for orientation, this is the base of the tongue here. So this is the front of the specimen. This is the back of the specimen. This is the larynx structure itself, and the larynx has a cartilaginous backing to it that can be pretty hard. I opened that so that I could look at the internal surface of the larynx. This is the epiglottis, and that's the flap which closes over your airway when you're swallowing or eating. This is your vocal cord here and here. This structure is called the false vocal fold. It looks like a vocal cord, but it's not. The rest of what we see is injury. There's some bruising here and a cut here in this tissue to the side of the larynx. And then there are large cuts here, here, there, and here. There's also one there that you can see a little bit of bruising from on the other side here, which these cuts go through the full thickness of the tissue. And these were cuts which were the end points of stab wounds which originated on the neck. Some of those we've seen, those were the stab wounds of the left side of the neck, mostly in that J cluster. And then on the right side, probably at least one was from some wounds on the right side of the neck that we have not looked at yet.
How many separate perforations were you able to see in Mr. Tower's larynx?
I found 6.
Now, I also see some, what is that white, is that used as a trajectory rod? That white thin object that we see on, yeah, what is that?
This is really, it's just a small wooden stick that I improvised to use to hold this open because there's a lot of tension here. And if I don't have something holding it open, it'll close and you won't be able to see the structures here as well. So I just used this essentially to prop it open so I could photograph the findings.
And those other instruments are also to keep it open?
Yes, these are what we call forceps. They're like tweezers.
Let's look at another picture of the larynx, please. Maybe might be helpful. This is 34 double G. And can you just orient us? Is there anything on this photograph that helps the jury to see those 6 separate perforations of the larynx?
Well, the perforations here to the side, I think you get a better feel for the extent of this. This is I'm encircling the opening here on the left side of the larynx. You can see that one perhaps a little more clearly too, and then you can better appreciate the bruising you see in the tissue adjacent to that here in the soft tissue or mucosa, which forms the wall of the larynx on both the left side and the right side here too, to some extent.
What happens to somebody's larynx or voice box when they sustain this kind of injury?
It would certainly impede your ability to vocalize or speak. Because the larynx isn't transected, it's hard to know exactly what that effect would be. It's possible that one still could have been able to vocalize or speak some, but it's also possible that that might have been greatly impaired.
I'd like to go to State's Exhibit 34H now, and we're going to look at some more injuries to Mr. Tower's face and his head. So can you please tell us about T?
Yes, T is a single stab wound. I want to make sure that I separate that out for you.
That's found under your...
Yes.
Yeah, on page...
So T does, even though it's not particularly long, it does potentially go deep to the level of where the carotid artery was. And unfortunately, because there's a lot of injuries which are coalescent under the skin, it didn't allow me necessarily to be able to correlate a single individual internal injury with the stab wound on the outside that caused it, because they commingled as the stab wounds went into the tissue. But it's possible that T caused an injury to the carotid artery, which is deep there.
So are you telling us that you don't know if T was the entrance point to injure the carotid artery, or that you're not sure if the carotid artery was actually injured?
The carotid artery was injured. I just wasn't sure which stab wound caused it.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
And then let's look at O. That's on Mr. Tower's temple, or above his ear.
Yes. So O is not a deep injury, and normally I wouldn't necessarily have categorized that as one of the injuries that I would count and put a separate letter to. But in this case, I chose to do that to accentuate this particular finding. This is a scrape on the skin, what we call an abrasion. And the reason that I included this is it's a patterned abrasion. The pattern consists of multiple parallel lines that are perpendicular to this single line here and extending downward from that. You see 3 or 4 of them there pretty clearly. I believe this is the same thing here, but they're blending together in this broader area of scraping here. This injury was probably sustained as a single impact or brush with a knife or possibly some other implement. maybe this was from two impacts, one causing this and the other causing this with the scraping, almost looking like the teeth of a comb there.
All right, thank you. Then, I know that there were numerous stab wounds to Mr. Tower's right and left shoulders, but I want to move on to stab wounds of the chest, please. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to 34A so that we can look at those again. Please. So we use this photograph, 34A, to talk about the wounds on Mr. Tower's face. Now I'd like to see if we can't focus on his chest, of which there are 4 wounds. So let's talk about those 4 perforations, please.
Certainly. The 4 I think you're referring to are the labeled injuries of F, C, B, and A. There are a few smaller superficial injuries that are really scratches, essentially, up here, at the top left of his chest, and then down here on the upper part of the right side of his abdomen. Those are the kind of injuries I was talking about before that I didn't necessarily number, but were additional injuries that he had sustained. With regard to the 4 numbered ones, though, A is the largest of these and perhaps thus draws your attention most immediately. These are all shorter on the skin. All of these penetrated some distance into the soft tissue. None of these injuries really caused, or these stab wounds caused any deeper injury, only soft tissue injury, with the possible exception of B, which probably nicked the internal mammary artery. It's a small artery which runs inside, well, on the underside of the sternum. And based on the way that the dissection is done, I thought that B had nicked that artery, but it was just hard to tell. It would have been a small injury. Over time, it could have caused some significant bleeding, but not one that I would have expected to immediately cause death.
So again, with these 4, if medical assistance had been forthcoming, they would not have been fatal.
That's correct.
I'd also like to look at stab wounds at the back, and you have those cataloged on page 9 of your report. And again, I'm going to revisit one of my exhibits, states 34C. So let's talk about those wounds to Mr. Tower's back, please, his upper back.
Yes, so the injuries to his back, especially if you mean by upper back, all these that you can see in the letters. Yes, sir. Yes. Again, these are injuries which are of different sizes and shapes, but all, in my opinion, sustained in the same way with a stab wound by an instrument like a knife. Of these, I have small clusters such as DD, and then I have individual injuries like FF, BB, EE, and GG, and a small cluster here of HH. Of all of these injuries, there was only one which was in the cluster of DD, which caused more than just soft tissue injury. And one of those in DD appears to have caused a small injury in the spinal cord by passing deep enough to go past the spine, the bones around the spinal cord, and to nick the spinal cord there.
And then I'm going to go to 34I to continue with the injuries to the back. So this encompasses the injuries that we just saw and a few more that are down on Mr. Tower's left side, sort of his shoulder there, on his left shoulder, and also on his left arm.
Yes.
Can you just briefly go through those?
Yes. So this is an injury to the back of his left shoulder, an injury to his lower left chest on the side, and an injury to his left forearm. Of these, this is again the most visually noticeable of the injuries, and I would call this more of a slashing kind of injury. It was not extremely deep, but does have a broad length on the skin. This involved only soft tissue without any other major injury, as did this injury I. The stab wound K went a little more deeply and did have a little penetration into the lung cavity, which is right below there. And it put a small stab wound into the lower lobe of the left lung. It was a small penetration, and there was very little bleeding, and there was really no collapse of the left lung on that side. So I think over time that could have been a potentially serious injury, but I believe that Mr. Tower died before it had a chance to manifest it being more serious, and that it really didn't cause him any particular impairment during the time of his life following the first infliction of injuries till the time he passed.
Now, there are also numerous injuries on the upper and lower, especially the upper extremities, the arms, left and right arms, and also some to the legs, both the right and left leg. But I want to talk to you about defensive wounds, if any. Did you see any sign of defensive wounds?
He did have injuries to his hands, which can be considered or might be described by some people as defensive wounds.
Okay, so let's look at those photographs, which are 34J, and I have another one that's just a close-up of 34J, 34K. When you look at those, can you tell if those are defensive wounds?
What I can tell you is that this particular injury is consistent with a knife blade coming across the finger like this. And it's characteristic of the kind of injury one would sustain while trying to grab a knife.
Now, you told us that based upon your count, it appeared that Mr. Tower sustained approximately 68, give or take 68 wounds. Can you tell us what was the specific cause of Mr. Tower's death?
Yes. Despite the vast number or the high number of those stab wounds, the stab wounds that really were significant were the ones in the neck that ended up injuring a couple of different large vessels. The carotid artery we've already talked about was one. Another artery was the subclavian artery, which is the artery that goes from the aorta over to the shoulders, goes through the base of the neck. Of course, there were many other smaller vessels which were cut as a result of all of these stabs. It was the bleeding from all of those injuries, especially the carotid and subclavian arteries, but all of those injuries which were his cause of death.
And do you have an opinion as to the manner of Mr. Tower's death?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that opinion is, please?
In my opinion, the manner of death was and remains homicide.
I want to move on now to Jennifer Tower, please. Dr. Vega, I'm showing you would have been marked for identification as States Exhibit 33A through 33Q. Look at those for me, please. Do you recognize these photographs as having been taken during the autopsy of Jennifer Tower?
I do.
Are they a true and accurate depiction of Jennifer Tower at the time of her autopsy in September of 2023?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm offering States Exhibit 33A through 33Q into evidence.
No objection.
33A through Q will be admitted. You may publish them at your leisure.
As to Jennifer Tower, Dr. Vega, were you able to count the number of penetrating stab wounds and superficial wounds that were inflicted?
Yes.
How many?
As with Mr. Tower, there were some small injuries that I did not include in that count, but the injuries that I did categorize that way totaled 79.
First place, I would like to look are the stab wounds to Ms. Tower's face, and we're going to be reviewing State's Exhibit 33A. And if you would just start wherever you like, Doctor, and just describe for the members of the jury what your findings were.
Well, as you described, this is a photograph of the left side of Ms. Tower's face, and here we have fairly distinct single marked stab wounds A, B, C, and D, and then there's a large cluster here designated as E, which you can see some but not all of, and then there's this cluster at the very upper part of the left side of the chest, perhaps you might say the top of the shoulder, designated as F. But focusing maybe on these four, A, B, C, and D, these were injuries which, like the other injuries that we've seen in Mr. Tower, are different sizes and shapes, different amounts of gaping, but basically all consistent with stabbing by the same or similar knives. All of these injuries involved the soft tissues and no real major vascular or vital organ injuries. So like very similar actually to Mr. Tower, the facial injuries largely superficial.
Okay, let's go to 33B, please. And now we're looking at the right side of Jennifer Tower's face and neck. Can you describe this group of, this cluster of stab wounds, please?
Yes, this cluster of stab wounds we see here is remarkable for a couple of things. Maybe one thing that I didn't point out as much in the other cluster as well is that those stab wounds, not A, B, C, and D, but the E ones. You know what, we didn't really talk about this, so I'll save that for later. I apologize.
Well, I won't remember it later.
I will. So in W, what we see here is that they're all essentially parallel to each other. They're all horizontal to the ground. It's not a very tight cluster, but the fact that all of these are roughly parallel to one another suggests that these were all inflicted on or at about the same time, with the position of the assailant and Ms. Tower here not changed. And to me, that suggests that she was already incapacitated at the time that these injuries were sustained. Of these, and I'm going to have to refer to my my notes here. These involved a lot of soft tissue underlying. One of these perforated superficially into the right side of the larynx. One caused injury to the internal jugular vein, and one caused a transection or a complete cutting of the carotid artery near the skull base. Like previously, I can't tell you which of these injuries specifically here caused which internal injury, because once you get past the skin, they commingled too much and I was unable to separate the tracks.
But perforations of the carotid artery and the jugular vein are lethal. May not be. Are they lethal?
Would be expected to be lethal, yes.
And then how many specific stab wounds do we find in this grouping?
I described this as 14 separate wounds. There are a couple, like this looks like it might be one long wound, but I counted this as 2 separate wounds. It appeared to have 2 separate tracks, at least for a brief time under the skin.
And you said that the assailant and Ms. Tower, the victim, were essentially in the same position for all of these stabbing?
That's what the clustering suggests, yes.
Thank you. Let's go now to State's Exhibit 33C. And now we're looking at the left side of Ms. Tower's face, her upper cheek, and let's talk about these injuries, please.
So this is almost a mirror image of what we saw in the last photo, the left side of the face. So here's the left ear. And of these injuries, you can see D and a little bit of B here that we already described. This cluster, very much like W, has many injuries which are all at essentially the same orientation. They're all relatively parallel to one another. And this clustering suggests that the injuries were all sustained at or about the same point in time, where the assailant and Ms. Tower were not moving relative to one another. Again, likely that she was already incapacitated at this time. These injuries also became commingled underneath the skin, so I was unable to specifically separate out the wound tracks of them as they went deeper, but at least one of them injured the left internal jugular vein. So we saw an injury to the right internal jugular vein from the other side, and this cluster of injuries caused at least one injury to the left internal jugular vein.
What is the function of the jugular vein, doctor?
The jugular vein brings all of the blood from the brain and much of the face and the other tissues of the head and neck down to go back to the superior vena cava and back to the heart.
What is the function of the carotid arteries?
The carotid arteries on each side are the main arteries which supply blood to the brain. They also supply blood to the eyes and the facial muscles and essentially all the structures and tissues in the head.
Let's look now at states 33D, and this is going to be another cluster of wounds. That are delineated as Fs. So,
Yes.
can you tell us about that grouping?
Yes, I have a small grouping of injuries labeled X. There are other injuries, Y, A, Z. Perhaps we'll see in other photos, but these injuries are to the back left side of the neck. So this is that cluster that we just looked at in E. And these injuries involve soft tissue, but no major vascular or vital structure injury.
Talk about this. Would you describe that as a cluster, or are they too far apart to be a cluster?
I think a cluster is a reasonable description for how I chose to document and photograph these injuries. They have similarity to the other ones that we've seen, the other clusters, in that the injuries are relatively parallel. They're not quite as tightly clustered, and there is a little variation in the angle, but I suspect that these injuries were also sustained in a similar way after Ms. Tower was essentially incapacitated.
And just to remind the jury, when you first arrived at the death scene, describe how the victims were lying. Were they prone or supine?
They were both prone, meaning they were lying face down.
So Ms. Towers would have been in this position, and so would Mr. Towers. Mr. and Mrs. Towers would have been in this position face down when these wounds were inflicted. If what you say, well, I know you can't opine about that, but
Objection, counsel testifying.
Sustained.
would these wounds have been inflicted after Ms. Towers was incapacitated?
I believe so, yes.
Now I want to talk about the stab wounds to Jennifer Tower's chest. I'm going to move on to State's Exhibit 33F. And this is a close-up, doctor, so if you can just tell us about O and P and the injuries and the damage to Miss Tower's body.
Give me just a moment, please.
It would be on 5 and going over to 6. Page 5 and 6.
Yes. Okay. This is this particular photograph doesn't have landmarks to guide the location, so I wanted to make sure I was looking at the right part in my report.
This was for a matter of decency, so
I understand. So these two are on the left lateral side of the chest. So the area of the chest is lateral and upper. So in this region here, what we might call the upper flank. As you can see, they're relatively close together, but not overlapping, and have a similar orientation, but unlike the other injuries that we saw that were like that, there's only 2 of them. It's not not a larger number, so I don't think I would designate this as a cluster. But there are 2 separate stab wounds there that have similar paths. They both involve soft tissue, and the wound O here just goes deep enough to penetrate into the left lung cavity. But that's all. It didn't go any deeper, so it didn't even injure the left lung at all.
right. Now I'd like to move on to stab wounds of Jennifer Tower's back. We're going to be looking at State's Exhibit 33G. What's significant about this photograph and the injuries that are depicted, Doctor?
So for reference, we've already talked about these wounds up here in the neck, clusters E and X. I mentioned Z briefly, but we didn't describe it any further. And then we have what I grouped as E and C and B. Of these injuries, I think you'll notice right off that they don't have that same clustering effect of being closer together and parallel in the same orientation. So I can't really make any opinion as to how or what order or what the relative condition Ms. Tower would have been in at the time that these injuries were sustained. Of all of them, BB, CC, and EE, all of them involve only soft tissue and no significant deeper injuries.
You also found during the autopsy stab wounds of Jennifer Tower's right shoulder, and those are depicted on State's Exhibit 33H. Can you address these injuries, please?
Yes, and this particular photograph really highlights injury Q here. There's an injury R here, which you see most of, but not all of here. It's at a different orientation, but close by to Q. These are essentially similar to O and P that we saw before. 2 wounds that are relatively close by, but don't have the same orientation. Of these, neither one of them causes any particular underlying injury, just soft tissue injury.
Let's move on to Ms. Tower's right arms. The right arm. And we're going to look at State's Exhibit 33I. Can you talk about these two injuries that you've labeled M?
Yes. So M has, actually, I'm going to take a moment to review what I have written here. I want to make sure I get this correct. Yes. Okay. So in this particular photo, we see two injuries, one of which has its letter covered. This is a superficial injury. It does not involve anything but the subcutaneous fat. M is a deep injury which traverses the skin and goes through the muscle and actually exits the arm on the other side. And that injury is separately designated as a letter in my photographs and documentation, but you can't see that injury in this particular photo. It's on the other side. Part of what's bridging these here is a superficial scratch. This really has nothing to do with the internal track of the blade as it injured the soft tissues between the entry here and as it stuck out the skin on the other side, which you don't see, and I have designated as S. Yeah.
Right, we'll look at that in a moment.
Yeah.
All right, so again, we're looking at M. S, unfortunately, is hard to see, although there is a tab there, a sticker on the far side, but your trajectory rod goes from M through into S.
Yes, and you can see the other end of the rod here, and we use these trajectory rods simply to demonstrate when an injury does pass all the way through the body, and when it does so clearly, so that these are inserted when the path through the tissue is already clear, just to demonstrate that for photography purposes.
So based upon what we're seeing, Doctor, did the cutting instrument or knife or whatever was used, did that go from M all the way through? Is it a through and through stab?
It is.
What about K? Wound K?
K is longer on the skin than it is deep, so it might be best classified as a cut or a slash, and thus is relatively superficial, did not cause any major underlying injury. And I believe the same is true for this injury here, which is J, which we can just barely see at the edge of the photo there.
Let's move on now to 33L. And there's J.
Yes.
So, again,
J.
we're looking at a through and through.
We are, and it's very superficial, this one. The other one, you can see S here now without the trajectory rod through it. That's M was over here, and the trajectory rod passed through here to S. Here we see a very superficial wound that was just long and deep enough to have a small exit over here on the edge, if you will, of the wrist area, as opposed to the middle of the forearm here.
These two injuries that we looked at, M into S and then J, are you able to say whether those are defensive wounds because they're on the victim's arm?
I think they're consistent with using the arms for self-defense during a knife assault. Some might characterize that then as being a defensive wound.
Now we're going to look at Ms. Tower's right hand. And what do we see here?
So this is the palm of her right hand, and this photograph was taken as the body was received by us, so before any cleaning was done. But even so, you can see the clear stab wound on the thumb side of the palm here next to the base of the thumb.
Okay, and moving to the next photograph, and they're related. So we see at the base of the thumb, and then we see at the base of the thumb on the opposite side of the hand. So what's going on with these two?
Yes. So this is an entrance and exit pair as we identified previously. The stab wound essentially passes through the soft tissue of the side of the hand at the base of the thumb and injured the underlying tissues, but no bone or anything more major than that.
Let's look at the left arm. This is Exhibit 33O. And we're looking at, is this a superficial wound, doctor?
It is. It passes, this cut wound goes just a little bit deeper than the subcutaneous fat there, but does not involve any deeper structures and certainly no major vessels or vital organs.
33P.
P shows us two injuries. H, which is slashing type or deep cutting injury that again involves only the subcutaneous fat. And I is a penetrating injury that involves the skin and soft tissues, but does not go particularly deep and does not cause any additional major injury.
And is this Mrs. Tower's left leg? Back of the left leg?
Correct.
Now I want to talk about Jennifer Tower's larynx. It appears that you removed both larynx from each victim. So what did you find that was distinctive about Jennifer Tower's larynx?
She did have a single stab perforation of the larynx here, but there were no deeper injuries. There were no stabs throughout the area through which the air actually passes. So the structures here were all intact. That's why the only photo I took here, I did not include that propping stick so that you could open up and see what was internal. There were no findings that were significant in here, just this one superficial perforation into the larynx. And I think it's worth noting that this is the inner surface of the upper portion of the larynx here. So the stab wound came from the outside through this in, but didn't go any deeper.
Doctor, after performing the autopsy on Jennifer Towers, were you able to form an opinion as to the cause of Jennifer Towers' death?
I was, yes.
What is and was your opinion?
Similar to Mr. Tower, I determined her cause of death to be perforations of multiple small and large blood vessels, including the carotid artery and jugular vein, due to multiple stab wounds.
And do you have an opinion as to the manner of Jennifer Tower's death?
Yes.
What is your opinion, doctor?
My opinion was and remains that the manner of death is homicide.
You have a moment to confer.
You may.
nothing further at this time, Doctor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are those the photos and evidence, Ms. Frablin, that you have?
I beg your pardon? Yes, they do.
Can we return those to the clerk? All right, defense, cross when you're ready.
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, doctor. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine. How are you, sir?
Wonderful. So we noticed in some of those pictures there was some redness and different coloring. Is that from the pooling from being in the prone position for a long period of time?
There is lividity that was present in those photos. Lividity is the pooling of blood that occurs after death, and it did occur because the bodies were in that position for a period of time.
Okay. So the redness that was seen, like different color skin colors, doesn't necessarily denote anything other than the pooling. Is that a fair statement?
It is.
Okay. As the same with if somebody is laying face down after death, you would expect the same pooling in the face area, correct?
Yes.
And could that make it appear as if there was bruising there?
It could. Okay. Yes.
So all of the different areas where we see redness as opposed to the white, that would be indications of pooling and lividity and where blood is settling, correct?
Almost everywhere. I'm trying to remember if there were any pink or red contusions anywhere in the bodies. There might have been a little bit of red contusion in one of the cases, but I think everywhere that I saw contusion, it was blue, and we talked about that.
Got it. So when we're talking about the different injuries, you say it's not necessarily from different implements just because they look different. If they're bigger, longer, things like that, that doesn't denote anything as far as different implements, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And I would suggest that would you say the vast majority of these injuries you would describe as superficial?
I would describe them at least as not deep enough to be life-threatening.
Sure. And I think the majority of the wounds that you talked about said that they were soft tissue wounds, correct?
That's right.
And those would not be lethal in and of themselves.
Correct.
When you're talking about the cause of death, that is different than the mechanism of death, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes they can be very closely related. Sometimes they're a little more distant, but yes.
So in this instance, you said the cause of death was multiple perforations, correct?
Yes.
In Mr. Tower's case, there were multiple perforations that were caused by stab wounds. That's the cause of death, correct?
Yes.
Would the mechanism of death in that case be essentially lowering the blood pressure to make the heart stop? Would that be kind of the mechanism by which the body would work?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, if there are lots of punctures into the lung cavity, that can create some other issues as far as lack of pressure and lungs not being able to expand. Did you see that in this particular case?
I didn't.
Okay. So essentially, it's the getting of the artery in the neck that is the majority of the problem, correct?
I think those were the most severe of the injuries by far in both cases.
Okay.
But I didn't want to rule out the cumulative effect of blood loss from all of injuries, and thus that's why I didn't single those out specifically, but included the other injuries as well.
And I know that I'm kind of conflating both of them, but it sounds like the cause of death for both of these individuals is essentially the same, the loss of blood from multiple perforations from stab wounds, correct?
Yes.
And that would be a similar mechanism of death as well, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now we're talking about manner of death being homicide. You would agree with me that there's only a finite number of manners of death that you could qualify it as, correct?
There are only 5, yes.
Okay, and that would be homicide, correct?
Yes.
Suicide,
Yes.
natural death,
Correct.
unknown, meaning you don't know what the manner of death is, correct?
We use undetermined, but
Determined.
more or less the same thing, yes.
And what's the 5th one? You said there were 5. What's the 5th one?
Homicide.
We started with homicide.
Okay.
Suicide, correct?
Yes.
That's 2.
Natural, undetermined, and accident.
Accident. Thank you so much. All right. So when we're talking about those things, you're not making a determination as far as legally this is what qualifies. That's more of an analysis to determine across the state how many homicides occur, how many suicides occur, things along those lines, correct?
That's right.
All right. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
First of all, Doctor, on cross-examination, there was a question about whether either of the victim has sustained any other injuries aside from the knife wounds. Did Mr. Tower have an injury to his head?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that injury consisted of, please?
So one of the injuries that we described was the lettered injury O, and that had, it was more of a scrape as opposed to a penetrating blade wound. Let me make sure I'm referring to any other minor head injury that I might have described. In addition to that injury, I believe we saw these in one of the photos, but I can't remember if they were specifically questioned about. There were 2 small abraded contusions on the head, one to the side of the left eye and one in the region of the chin. They were pretty minor, not necessarily very easy to see.
Yes, I did not question you on those, but I am questioning on now. So in addition to those additional injuries to Mr. Tower's head, I want to ask you this final question. If a defendant admitted to killing his parents, would that be consistent with your finding of homicide?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Is the witness free to step down?
He is.
Nothing further.
All right, you may step down now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Folks, in just a moment, we're going to take about a 10 or 15-minute break, okay? So if you can leave your notepads face down, writing implements on top. Don't discuss anything related to your jury service during our break, and we'll bring you back shortly, okay? Everybody please stand. Jurors exiting.
Your Honor. Your Honor.
Everybody may be seated. Apparently there's something else we need to cover. Let's have the attorneys come forward. It has to be done now. Okay. You want it done now?